Who the hell is trying to break into my apartment?
Please, release me. Yeah, we getting stats. Yeah. Release yourself from the gas that binds you. I could not be bothered. There's a girl on TikTok who talks about politics and she pretends that she's a stripper. Like the song be like, don't stop, don't get it. I'm your nasty dancer, dancer for money. Do what you want me to do. Something about it really, it moves me. But that's not what we're here for today. Today we are here to talk about my quarter one stats. Hop up out the bed, put my shea butter on. I don't want to grab it, but I put my shea butter on. Turned on the camera and said, what's up? Yeah, we getting stats. Yeah, I'm talking quarter two. You know what we about to do. Yeah. Yeah. I know that's right. I put my J's on. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, I already planned out this video, so I'm going to do some couple check-ins. And then I need to figure out how I want these stats to look like on the screen. But you know, we're just gonna do the very best we can. I know last time I did like a tier ranking thing too. I think I'll figure it out as I'm filming this video, and then it won't look weird. Because last time I gave y'all two videos. I gave you a tier ranking one, and then I gave you one where I'm talking about them like I am right now. So we'll just figure that out. I had to do a top bun because I couldn't be bothered. I could not be bothered. Okay, check-in. My check-in is gonna consist of like some things that roughly guide me every month when I'm reading. And you know, we're just gonna be honest about, did those things happen or did they not? Amen. Okay. So the first thing is my battery dying? Oh, that says 59%. I said 9%? Please, release me. I really just got one that said, I will always love you like I do. Okay. I don't even know if that's even better. You know what? Some things are above me. The first thing I want to talk about is, did I read a lot of nonfiction? I wanted to loosely read one nonfiction every month. Did that happen? No. Just keep it succinct on that. Was I reading mostly audiobooks? Yes. So I said in a couple vlogs ago that I found out that naturally, without the pressure of the book community, my natural reading level is 7 to 11 books a month. Am I still doing that? Yes. I'm actually doing like 8 to 10. It's still within that 7 to 11 book time frame. Am I paying attention to series? I'm going to say no, even though I've been working really hard on trying to finish the last book in the Diviner series, and I've decided I'm going to do a separate video about that, and I need to figure that out fast of what that video will look like, because I don't want to like forget all that I've read. And not saying that I forget every book that I've read, but just, you know, as time go on, you forget more and more and more, just naturally occurs. So I'm trying to figure out what I want, how I want that to be structured. If you have any thoughts on how I can structure talking about the Diviners, that would be really great. Put that in the description box below. Also, when I'm doing reviews or talking about the books that I read in a quarterly manner, like I did in quarter one, I do like to talk about how I'm generally feeling in the book community. And I think that I've been feeling much better in the book community, especially YouTube, than I have in a while. TikTok, I haven't seemed to find my stride on the book community in TikTok. And I think it's because I almost never am consistent on TikTok. Like every once in a while, I'll post a review or I'll say something bookish. But for the most part, I don't really pay attention to TikTok. To me, TikTok is very overwhelming. Also, I don't think I really understand how to do short form content. So I started in YouTube, and actually I started on Instagram, and then I branched to YouTube. And then but even on Instagram, I would just like post once weekly or something weekly, but then I stopped posting like years ago consistently on Instagram, and I just really be on YouTube as far as like the platform that you will find me talking about books. So I do feel better. I have been having like a lot of moments of discouragement, like in Q1 and in last year in the book community overall, because it's just like there's just some things in the book community that can make it really unenjoyable to be a part of. It's just a lot of isms going around. There's just a lot of like misunderstandings. There's just a lot of just toxic shit that I just really just want us to just talk about our books, enjoy talking about our books together, and understand that there is politics in our books. There are different experiences and representations in our books without people really holding on to just things that don't serve them, I guess I will say. And I wish people were more reflective. I wish we were more of a call-in community. I wish we were more of a accountability community, because accountability requires you to also be willing to like work with that person. It doesn't mean that they are canceled forever. It doesn't mean that, you know, they can never be redeemable. And I think just cancel culture and booktube, and it's just a lot. And there are people, I won't even hold you, who I feel like just go out here and just are bad actors and do shit that is fucked up and have no remorse and don't really care and just do it because they don't give a fuck. They don't care. And those people, we can't be helped. You know, that's, I feel like, what can you do other than cancel them? You know, like they're continuously to choose ignorance and toxicity and harmful narratives. So it's like, what can you, that can't be helped. But people who are making mistakes and owning up to it and trying to, you know, better themselves because of it, I don't think we should be canceling those folks. So it's an odd community. I feel like the community was more tight knit when I joined, and people were, I don't know, kinder to each other. And now it's like there's some bullshit in the book community every day. I used to be like, dang, every month something's going down. And now it's every day. Like every day, if I wanted to find bookish drama, I will find it every day. And not just once a day, like one thing happening, multiple things a day. Like Threads, I can't even get on Threads, because every time I get on Threads, there's something every day. So that's how I'm feeling about the book community in general. So let's get into the stats. In April, I read 9 books. Of those 9 books, I'm going to tell you what my best books were and what my least books were. And then we'll get into some other stats about that. So my best books of April, and I was trying to choose like the best book, but I couldn't because I just couldn't. So some of the best and least for each month, April, May, and June, will have several books because, you know, this is my channel and my video. So, you know, your girl can make those rules. My first best book is The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. And this is a book that's, I think is set in the 1800s. And it follows this guy called Good Stab as he is talking to this priest about things that has happened to him and how he has come to be, what has happened to his tribe due to colonialization. And he is a vampire. And you continue to watch him tell the story to the priest, and the priest also be reflective about him, about his behaviors. A lot of the context of what was said in this book is very historically appropriate, so I just want you to go in knowing that. But the storytelling of this book was literally chef kiss. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. And then Diviner, shout out to Olivia Reed's a motherfucking latte. Shout out to you, Liv. Shout out to you, Olivia. Do you hear me? Shout out to you, who told me to read the Diviner series. Liv, I hope every headache you have just magically disappear. I hope every ailment that you have just goes away. You deserve nothing but peace for the rest of your life for this recommendation. People really have been getting in their bag with their recommendations. You hear me? My favorite recommendation, side note, because y'all know I'm tangential, but my favorite recommendations have been from Ashley from used to be Bookish Realm, but now the Realm of Kidlit Comics. She recommended The Language of Dragons, and although I couldn't get out of my frustration with one of the characters, and then I had to reframe it every time I read it. I really, really loved that book, and I gave it 4 stars, and I can't wait to read the second book. I think it comes out this year. And then we have Monet from Life as Monet. She doesn't do content anymore, but her recommendation on the Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. And then The Diviners from Olivia Rizalate. Oh my God, you guys been doing the work. Ashley has always been a person that I turn to if I'm in a slump, and I know if she recommends a certain book that book is going to hit and I'm going to get out of that slump. But I'm going to also be turning to Monet and Olivia as well, because wow, love The Diviners. The Diviners is a great series. It's set in the 20s in New York, and it's about this group of people ranging from a little kid to grown adults who all have a special ability to do something, and being hunted by these maleficent spirit or entities that want to take this power for them to really cause ultimate chaos in the world. And I just think that it's written so beautifully. It includes so many people from so many different backgrounds. I think this is who that turf, we know who she is, think that she is. No, you can never be Libba Bray. You can never. So yes, that was my favorites of April. My least favorites was Crossbones by Kathy Rice, because it was just filled with so much is not real propaganda. And I realized a couple of her stuff was filled with that. And I talked about Kathy Wright's novels in my mid-year freakout tag. It just didn't give. I thought I was gonna enjoy reading this series. This is a series I've always wanted to read. I wanted to finish it this year, and I planned to read I think it was 2 books a month to finish it this year. And you guys, I just couldn't be bothered, and I realized life was literally too short, and you just got to keep it pushing. You got to keep it pushing. So let's talk about the stats of April. The stats of April. So one of my books I gave 1 star. 2 books I gave 3 stars. 3 books I gave 4 stars. 1 book I gave 4.5 stars, and then 2 books I gave 5 stars. So on average, my average rating was 3.72, which I think isn't bad. I mean, there was more higher stars than lower stars, so I would say it was an overall enjoyable reading month. And then as far as format, only 22% I read was printed and 78% was audio. And I read 718 pages, but listened to a little bit over 89 hours that month, which I think is not bad as well. And then I will say that even though you guys know that I love reading the spooky genres, and I have been doing that, somehow fantasy has attacked me, and I fantasy has been creeping in, which is so crazy, because I thought I would never ever be able to return to fantasy, and that has not been the case. So here we are, and you'll see that in other months as well. But for April specifically, I did read a lot of thriller. If you look at this chart, there's a lot of thriller, there's a lot of horror, there's a lot of mystery, a lot of historical crime, and then fantasy. And then there's, some manga and comics, as there always is. I need to really increase my manga and comics. I need to really hunker down in that. I don't know when I'm gonna do that. That might be my secondary TBR in October. It's just to catch up on some manga. But anyway, I'm liking this chart of looking at all the genres that I was reading. And then for page numbers, like 11% of what I read was 500 plus pages. Now that gives me a lot of joy because I know in certain situations I feel like there are authors who overwrite. Like, come on babes, let's cut it up. However, I feel like there are some books that I'm like, I don't mind how long this is. And I feel that way about the Last Magician series by Lisa Maxwell. All of those books are 500 plus pages, and I don't have an issue with it. I think that everything is needed to move the story along, so I don't have a problem with that. And I wanted to read more books that were a bit longer because I just wanted to feel like I'm in a world for a longer piece of time or a longer point of time, and especially in books that I enjoy. Like, I wish Live a Brave books were longer than they were, but you know, here we are. And that's just something I gotta deal with. So I'm really surprised because I just screenshotted these things and I'm looking at them now without like looking at them. So I'm really surprised that 11% of what I read in April was higher than 500 pages, and then 89% was between 300 and 499. So that felt very good to read because I do have another like goal of the years. Each year I read is to find longer books. It's really why I like the Tomathon that they do. I participated in every time just loosely and never talk about it on my channel, but there's just certain challenges I participate and don't really talk about on my channel. Buzzword readathon is one of them, and then you know there's just things there's just bookish things that I do, or like bingo cards that I see randomly that I do that I just don't talk about as much on my channel, only because I often forget to do those things. So the mood of most of what I read in April was emotional and mysterious and dark, which is like, yeah, that tracks, you know what I mean? That does track. And then the pace of most of my books were medium. Some were slow and some were fast, but most of it is medium. And I do feel like most of the books that I read, the pace is medium, even if it's a long book. I know people will be like, long books, and they might think, oh, that's a slow pace book, but I'm just like, it still was giving medium, babe. So let's go to May. It's gonna be May. The best books that I read in May was Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray, of course, book 3 in the Diviner series, after Layer of Dreams, and then Salt Roads by Nalo Hopkinson, and also Layers of Dreams by Libba Bray. So we had 2 Libba Brays that were best, and then 1 Nalo Hopkinson. So the Nalo Hopkinson book is a book that I've been trying to read forever. It's on my TBR for the year. Like, I have a shelf on my bookcase of books that I want to read for the rest of the year, and I don't think I'm gonna get to them because I keep doing other stuff. So I just need to figure out how to incorporate these books. And I do know there's like 7 books on the shelf that I just want to focus on for July Noir if I get to them. So hopefully we can get over there. But Before the Devil Breaks You, I really enjoyed that book. I'm afraid that I'm going to spoil, so I won't, but I really love that book. Before the Devil Breaks You, it still follows, like I said, those group of people who have powers, who have to band together to really fight against just all kind of atrocities that are coming their way and coming in the path of destroying mankind as we know it. In Before the Devil Breaks You, they are finding out about all these different like ghosts. These ghosts that are leaving the spiritual plane and merging in with reality in a way. And I don't want to spoil it, but my favorite part of this book specifically was when something happens, and I just have to be vague. Something happens, and then these ghosts of enslaved people come into the book, and how white people responded to them, how they responded to the white people. It just was such a beautiful scene that I think it will always sit with me. It will always have a part of my heart, and I think that it was beautifully done to say that a white woman wrote it. I'm just trying to be honest. To say that a white woman wrote it, you guys, I don't know. I don't have any words. I don't have any words. Libba Bray really sat there and wrote these phenomenal books. Phenomenal. And then Layer of Dreams had to do with people mysteriously dying in their dreams and no one knowing why, until the diviners really started to have some similarities with these people. And then there's two people in the diviners. There's a young woman named Ling and an older guy named Henry that can really go into dreams and figure things out and like be able to communicate with people. Ling can communicate with the dead and Henry can go into your dreams. So their powers working together really made them the stars of what was happening in the Layers of Dream.
Who the hell is trying to break into my apartment?
Bruh, I got to move. Anyway. Hey y'all, I hope y'all are doing good. But as I am editing now, I'm realizing I never talked about Salt Roads. So Salt Road by Nalo Hopkinson, I talked about it on my channel before. But Nalo Hopkinson is really that girl when it comes to writing science fiction, fantasy, and characters that is so morally gray that you're unsure if you should ride for them or not. And Salt Roads follows several different stories that appear that they are connected. They're connected in the sense of like they're talking about Black people who have struggled at different moments of Black history. And they're also about like queer love. They're about, you know, spirits that can get into you and make you do things that you don't want to do. It's a level of spookiness that I can always count on when I'm reading her books. So while I was reading each of the stories in this novel, I just kept being like, wow, she writes characters in such a dynamic way that even if they only have a small part in their book or in her book, you feel like that character impact was not small. It was big. It was felt through, like you were able to attach yourself to the character. It doesn't matter how much like screen time the characters got. So because of that, I rated this book pretty highly, so it ended up being one of my favorite books of the month. Words books, none, but I did read 8 books this month, so let's get into the stats. So on average, my ratings was 4.22. To me, fantastic, love it, love it. So I gave one book 3 stars, I gave one book 3.5 stars, I gave 2 books 4 stars, gave one book 4.25 stars, and I gave 3 books 5 stars. So that's that. I really felt like I was in my bag. You know, I was like, get your reading on. And then I read, so as far as format, 384 pages read and 74.75 hours read. So 13% was in print, 13% was in digital, and 75% was in audio. So it used to be when I was on Storygraph that I really couldn't trust my format because I was just adding books, and not editing the addition. That is so important. And that's why I really like Storygraph for so many reasons over Goodreads, but I just feel like it's more intuitive of how to do some things, and there's some things that are available on Storygraph that's not available on Goodreads, and that is these stats. So yeah, knowing that I read mostly audiobook is good because I just be in my head about some things, so I'm happy that I'm continuing that trend of most of them being audiobooks. And then for genre, so when I first started my channel, people who have been on my channel since the beginning, I did read a lot of historical fiction. It's one of my favorite genres. That's why I'm really excited about the books that Monet and Olivia have been like giving me, or like recommendations, because they all have a historical point of view. And to me, a historical book, I want to read it ASAP, especially if it got some spooky stuff in it. I want to read it immediately. I used to read a lot of like historical war books, but man, that's just depressing. So I have taken a little break on that. But In the month of May, most of the books I read were historical. Some of them were young adult, which I don't really read a lot of young adult, but I have been reading more young adult this year than I have in the past. And then fantasy, like I said, queer, magical realism, and thriller, horror, mystery, and children's as well. And then as far as the pace, most of it is medium. That is very much on par with me, standing at 71%, and then 29% was a slower pace. And then as far as page number, again, very proud of myself, 25% is over 500 pages. Less than 300 pages was at 38%. And then 300 to 499 is 38% as well. So I really like that as well. And then most of my books was just adventurous, mystery, emotional, those type of things. So I think that's pretty much sums it up for me as well. Now we're going to move on to June. Some say junio. So for June, it was really giving. There was a lot of good books in June. The first is Cosmic Queries. If you're new to my channel, this is the first video you've ever watched, you will know that I am an astrophysics nerd. My good friends is an astrophysicist. And I have to fight for my life not to call her and ask her a bunch of shit about her job. And I almost rarely do it unless she brings it up, because it's like she has a hard job and she works for NASA. So I don't want to be just like inundating her with shit that I just found out that I want to talk about that she probably knows about. And if you heard that, that was my stomach and not my butt. Sometimes you do gotta fart and let it out. I always say, release yourself from the gas that binds you. However, that was my stomach, so I do need to eat after this. Cosmic Queries, written by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and then someone else, I think it was his co-star. I can't remember. Someone else who aided in writing this book. I think it was a couple authors. And Cosmic Queries was such an informative novel of just things that happens in the cosmos that we don't know about. There's a lot of people who really coin things. It was cool to hear about the guy who developed like this specialized telescope, and he was Italian, and like a thing that happened to his nose. It was cool to learn about all these different like German scientists who came up with things, and it also made me think of like, when did they come up with these things, because a lot of things can be tied to Germany's dark history. So there was just so many things in this book that just really piqued my curiosity. I just didn't know like the way in which like light travels, the way they talk about light in the book. One of the facts that blew my mind, many facts that blew my mind, but one was about Jupiter and how Jupiter has more water than all of the oceans combined on Earth. Yikes. But the atmosphere is unlivable, and I'm just like, how will we even get that water? Like, what does that even look like? And one thing that was also sad in the book is when they talked about how they've been putting out messages kind of like waiting for someone, or to figure out if there's other entities or beings in the universe, and that they put this message out over 100 years ago, and in a couple years that message would totally fade. So even if they put the message out, and even if someone received the message, we will never get it. And the next book I read was Babel by R.F. Kuang. Loved. I loved Babel so much. In one of my vlogs, I talked about how Babel really touched me emotionally, because I did cry several times reading that book. That it touched me so much emotionally because it was really hard for me to read a book that puts in plain language, as R.F. Kuang tend to do, that the colonizing acts of taking people's language for them will never be forgiven, could never be undone. And I was just feeling all the emotions of knowing that I have ancestors where I don't speak the same tongue as them. And I think about all of the context that is lost because I speak a few languages. One language I speak, I would say like closest to fluency would be Ukrainian. And to me, I feel like when I do Duolingo and it's like practicing my Ukrainian, it feels very robotic than when I am actually speaking to a person who speaks Ukrainian. And it's just like, there's just things in it, in the language, that you can't always get from a textbook. For example, so Ukraine, if you think about its country, if you think about the country of Ukraine, you have Eastern Ukraine, Central Ukraine, Southern Ukraine, and Western Ukraine. I have been all over Ukraine, and I've been to every region, like as far as like north, east, southwest. And I haven't been to every oblast, which is like every county. And I haven't been to every oblast, and I think it's 27 oblasts in Ukraine. However, depending on where you live in Ukraine, the way language is spoken is different than others. And it also depends on Russification. It also depends on what country is next to the region that they're speaking Ukrainian. So for example, I lived in Chernihiv, which is in eastern Ukraine, kind of, and it is also northern. So most people there speak a type of Sorgic, which is kind of like a blending of language. They speak a type of Sorgic that is influenced by Russian. So you can almost always hear someone speaking in Russian, or it's like a blending of Russian and Ukrainian when they're speaking, right? So it's kind of like you have to know both languages. And a lot of people think Russian and Ukrainian is the same, and it is not. I just want you guys to know, like, Ukrainian language has more in common with Polish than it does with Russian, just so people understand. And I also want to just throw this in. When you're talking about Ukraine, make sure you say Ukraine. Saying the Ukraine is implying that they are the southern Russia, which is very offensive to Ukrainians. And it also tells them that they don't have sovereignty to their land and that they're just little Russia instead of being Ukraine, right? So, Slava Ukraini to my people out there. But when we're talking about like just regions, like I said, living in Chernihiv, it's just like while I was living there, I always heard that intersection between Russian and Ukrainian. So a lot of times there, if I want to say someone, like tell someone goodbye, or it was nice meeting you or whatever, I'll say Shashliva vam, which is like happiness to you, paka, bye, right? And paka is Russian. That's the word for goodbye in Russian. Versus when I moved to eastern Ukraine and I lived in Rivne, and Rivne is closest to Poland. So you hear a lot of like Polish influence on Ukrainian there. And if you move to Lviv, which is kind of, I won't say it's like, Ukrainian call it like chista. That is like Ukrainian is spoken in Lviv. And I've met some people in Lviv who would get very upset with you if you spoke Russian to them or said anything Russian to them. They're very patriotic of Ukraine. And there, I don't say paka when I'm in Lviv. I say, Shashliva vam, do pobachення. And do pobachення is how you say goodbye in Ukrainian. So it's like when it depends on where I'm going of how much I'm going to speak. Like I used to go to a place in Ukraine called Sumy, and Sumy, even though that is in Ukraine, in Sumy, Russian is heavily spoken there. In Poltava, Russian is heavily spoken. And if you understand what Russia has done to the country of Ukraine, and you understand Russification, you understand why the language is different, which is why when I lived there, and the president was really trying to push for people to learn Ukrainian in schools and teach Ukrainian, and why he got a lot of pushback is because there are places in Ukraine where people don't know how to speak Ukrainian. They're born and raised in this country. They're proud to be Ukrainians. and love living there and will fight for Ukraine to the death of them, and they do not know their language. And I think that a lot of us can really lend that to other places in the world. Even in the US, there are so many indigenous people living and existing in America and don't know their language. And we have to think of what colonization has done, has been the engine to really cause that devastation, right? And I think about the colonization of Russification and how that also impacts Ukrainian people. So I'm thinking of all of these things. I'm thinking of all these linguistical, if that's the word, I don't know, I feel like I'm just rambling, but thinking about all these linguistic things just really impacted me while I was reading Babel. Thinking about, you know, Spanish as being a colonizing language and how that has impacted people, how English has impacted people. It's just, I couldn't help but have an immense amount of sorrow while reading Babel and feeling incredibly seen. R.F. Kuang is just so good. She is so incredibly good at talking about nuance in a way that's not pacifying the horrors of history. So I will say that. And then the language of dragons, just finding out the language of dragons, I felt very similar to, because if you ask anyone who knows me personally, I am big on gatekeeping. Gatekeep your shit. Gatekeep your shit, because the tools of colonization will make you feel like you should have always gatekeeped your shit, because the tools of colonization is a force to be reckoned with. And reading Language of Dragons, I kept being like, wow, these people are literally willing to burn the world down to figure out how dragons are communicating with each other. Like the lengths that they're willing to do to infiltrate their sacredness that is embedded in their language for their capitalistic and colonial gains is sickening. So I enjoyed reading this book because I feel like even though it is talking about dragons, which are mythical creatures, and talking about language, I think a lot of people who reading this should also ask themselves, how can this be translated to Aboriginal people? How can this be translated to Native people? How can this be translated to Indigenous people? Because it can be. It definitely can be. And then the next book I read, which was one of my best, was King of Ashes by S.A. Cosby, which really deserve every award in the goddamn world. I'm talking every award in the goddamn world. It deserves it. It deserves all of it. This book, and just the breakdown of siblings and, you know, trauma within the family and trying to be a fixer and end up getting in more shit and trying to, you know, rebuild a legacy that your family has had in your community. It's just, it was just so beautifully done. I mean, S.A. Cosby is really that guy. I don't really have a lot of critiques about him anyway, just in general. And then The Last Magician, which is the first in the series by Lisa Maxwell, that follows this young girl trying to go back in time to retrieve this item that she was told to retrieve by her mentor, this man who raised her. And then she just falls into all of these different things that happened to her that was just unfair, and then she didn't realize how long she was gone. And then there's like moments of betrayal that happens in the book, either that she has to do or is done towards her. And I just think that it was done really well. I love the time moving aspect. I love the aspect of assassins, you know, femme fatale being like a part of the book. So I don't know, I really like the book, and it's I think it's primarily fantasy. I could be wrong, historical fantasy, but I was here for it. So, and then the worst books that I read in June was The Ballad of Songs and Snakes. I will not be quoted. Snow is a irredeemable character. That's all I will say there. And then I read Marvel Universe Kraven, and I didn't need to read that. That was boring. So for the stats, I read 10 books this month. Shout out to your girl. 10 books. 10 books was read. Average rating of 3.98. So 2 books was a 2.6. 0 star. 1 book was 7.5. 3 books was 4 stars. And then 4 books was 5 stars. Really, I was in my bag. Most of what I read as far as format was in audiobook form. Close to 119 hours was listened to and 120 pages was read. And then for the most part, when we think about like the genres that I read, most of it was thriller, historical, and fantasy, and young adult. And then most of what I read was fiction, and 11% was nonfiction, which I really wish most of my reading months had a nonfiction sliver. But, you know, that just didn't happen. And then most of the books were between 300 and 499 pages. But again, I'm still continuing the trend of reading books that are larger than 500 pages. And I really love that for me as well. In addition to the pace being medium, which I told you guys it mostly is. And then, you know, 10% being fast. And then as far as the mood, most of the books that I read was dark, tense, and adventurous, which is like pretty much my vibe. So I say all that to say that I hope you enjoyed my Q2 book stats, and then I'm going to try to put together so that you can get it sometime this month, because I pulled back on doing a lot of videos because I'll be doing a lot of sprints for July Noir. I'm gonna have to try to figure out somehow, because I'm filming this on Saturday and I want this to go out tomorrow. So hopefully you'll get this on Sunday, July 13th, which is the first day of July Noir. However, I do want to still do my stats because I think that my stats are funny. Let me see if I can find my book to remind you guys what my stats are when I do a tier ranking video. I'm your nasty dancer, dancer for money. Do what you want me to do. Okay, they're called Bree Superlatives. Books that made my ass itch / books that were disappointed. Books that made me piss my pants, so books that scared me. I don't know why I'm a little embarrassed about what this says, so I'm going to try to reword it. Books that made me, you know, feel spicy. Let's just say that. And then, or it could be books that moves me. So for number 3, it could be, you know, books that made me be like, I need to get on Tinder right now. No, I'm just kidding. But, or books that moved me. And then number 4 is books that put me first. So books that I thought just were 4 and 5 star reads. Like they were just phenomenal, like just great books. And then books that made me want to go to the comment section. So those are the 5 categories. So I will have to download all the books that I've read and then put them on the, what is it called? The tier ranking. Yes. Anyway, with that being said, I hope you like this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you guys for being interactive with the content that I put on this channel. Some videos are hits, some are missed, but that is life. That is life. You win some, you lose some. Sometimes you lose it all. I don't know. It just really depends on what that is. Anyway, see you later.